Denise, thanks so much. Happy Bastille Day to you, girls. Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Thanks for joining us. It is Friday, July 14th. Your top stories right now, 6 a.m. on the East Coast. President Trump celebrates Bastille Day in Paris. He closed out his visit to Paris watching the military parade this morning, but he's coming home to the battle over health care. Senate Republicans unveiled their revamped legislation, which Vice President Mike Pence applauded yesterday.
This legislation will put American health care back on a path toward more freedom, more choices, and more affordability for working families.
Well, the bill now has 2 no votes. We will look at what comes next. Plus, new exemptions to the president's travel ban, a Hawaii judge adding grandparents and other relatives to the list. The big story for markets this morning, bank earnings. We are waiting on JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, all reporting their second quarter numbers this morning. That could be a market mover. What you need to know ahead of those numbers. As you see, the stocks are mixed right now ahead of the reports. We are coming off of another record close for the Dow Industrials, the 24th all-time high this year. Futures indicating a bit of a pullback this morning. Fractional move coming off that record high. As you see, Dow Industrial set to open down about 10 points. We'll see what the bank numbers show and whether or not that changes things. European markets are mixed. European indices, as you see there, FT 100 down 0.25%. The other majors are flat. In Asia, overnight gains across the board to report. Fractional moves, nonetheless, but in the plus column. Planet of the Apes swinging back into theaters. The full box office preview later this hour. All that coming up this Friday morning. And joining me to talk all about it, Fox Business Network's Dagan McDowell. Kingsview Asset Management Chief Investment Officer Scott Martin is here. And H Squared Research Officer Hitha Herzog is with us. Great to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.
You too.
And coming up, we were out at the Barclays Center for the third stop of the Conor McGregor-Floyd Mayweather press tour.
How was that? You went yesterday. I know you interviewed him.
No, you know what? When you're young and hungry, you show up on time. When you've already gotten paid, not so much. I'll leave it at that. But some surprises in store. Jack Brewer's coming up, too, and we will have a very, very heated debate about who could win that fight.
I love this. I cannot wait to hear about it.
It could be a record. Well, I will put money down on the fact that it will be a pay-per-view record.
I agree with that. Now, we'll live up to the hype, though. That's the question.
It was quite animated, though, the scene yesterday, though, wasn't it?
What?
They were very excited. I mean, they were very just animated and a little out of control over there.
You've never seen trash talking like that.
Yeah.
It hit a new low.
They're pros.
A new high and a new low.
I was so excited you were going. I want to hear all about it. We got that coming up. Special report from Dagan. Coming up this morning, Americans for Tax Reform President Grover Norquist is joining the conversation. Arkansas Congressman French Hill is here. Counsel to the president, Trump. Kellyanne Conway is with us. And CEO of the Brewer Group and former NFL star Jack Brewer is here as well. Got a big program ahead, so do stay with us this morning. President Trump is departing from Paris for Washington right now at this hour after celebrating Bastille Day with French President Emmanuel Macron. At the top of the president's agenda when he returns to the nation's capital, healthcare reform. Senate Republicans unveiled a reworked version of their bill to repeal and replace Obamacare yesterday. It aims to win conservative support by letting insurers offer lower cost plans while at the same time offering moderates billions to combat opioid abuse and help consumers with skyrocketing insurance costs. This is a meeting of the minds here. President Trump tweeting this morning about the effort, saying this: Republican senators are working hard to get their failed Obamacare replacement approved. I will be at my desk, pen in hand, waiting to sign that legislation. Adding on the pressure, the president tweeted this: so important, representative senators under leadership of the Senate Leader McConnell get health care plan approved after 7 years of Obamacare disaster. Must happen. After all of these years of suffering through Obamacare, Republican senators must come through as they have promised. The president talking a lot about that health care bill this morning, but the effort is already facing additional headwinds. So far, 2 senators, yesterday we heard from Kentucky's Rand Paul right here, and Maine's Susan Collins, have said that they are a no on this updated bill. Joining us right now to weigh in, House Freedom Caucus member and a member of the House Foreign Relations Committee, Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Your reaction to the changes to this Senate bill, is this going to be enough?
Well, Maria, you have some U.S. senators who ran for years and years on repealing and replacing Obamacare. They were helped by contributions from grassroots conservatives all across the country because they were told, if you just give us the Senate and the White House, we'll be able to make this a reality. And so I think it's frustrating to see people who have run on that, who have voted to fully repeal this, not even be willing to do, this is not a full repeal, this is a compromise bill. And to say that this goes too far, that just shows that all your rhetoric for years and years and all those votes, that was all window dressing and you never meant it. And that is what really gets Republican voters back home upset, when you have the rhetoric back home, then you come to Washington and you do something totally different. So they have got to get it done. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a huge disappointment for all the people that sent them there.
Do you know if there are any other no's at this point? Have you heard more pushback? We know that the Republicans cannot afford any more no's, since Susan Collins and Rand Paul have publicly said they're not buying into this.
What I've been hearing is that nobody else is not gettable, that you can get 50. I don't know that they're there yet, but there's definitely a pathway to do that, and I know they're trying to work on those details. And they did make some good changes, adopting the Cruz Consumer Freedom Amendment, which really I think is the key to unlocking reductions in premiums, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of moving parts with Obamacare, taxes, Medicaid, but you got to lower the premiums. That has been the hammer to the middle-class families across America. And so I think that it's a compromise package. I think there's probably something in it for everyone. So I do think they have a path to 50.
Congressman, it's Dagen McDowell, but you have Republican senators standing by Obamacare tax increases. The 0.9% payroll tax and the 3.8% tax on investment income, they stay in. They will continue to exist. And so how do Republicans step up and say, we stand for Democratic tax increases?
Well, we shouldn't say that. I mean, I think
that's exactly what's going on.
What Senator Rounds said right here yesterday.
Yeah, my view would be, I want to repeal all of Obamacare. That's what we promised. That's what we should do. I look around my chamber, I look around the Senate, and unfortunately, even though everybody who is a Republican ran on the same things I did, not all of them are willing to do that. And so you're in a situation, can you roll back significant portions of Obamacare? But yeah, those tax increases that they're not going to roll back, it seems that that's what's going to happen in the Senate bill, that will cost jobs. The Tax Foundation said you roll back the investment taxes, that's 100,000 jobs that would be created. And we want to facilitate investment in this country. We don't want to repel it. When you tax it more, you get less of it. It's just bad economics.
Congressman, you mentioned this isn't a full repeal. What's the consolation prize here to the American people with respect to not getting this full repeal and kind of half-baking it this way to get it through? I mean, isn't it better to move on to something that is a full repeal, even if it takes longer? I know that's going to upset one Donald Trump, but isn't that the better solution longer term for the American people?
Well, if they don't get this bill in the Senate, I would absolutely support us passing the bill that Obama vetoed in 2016, and the president has endorsed this as well, which would basically neuter Obamacare, defunds it, repeals all the taxes, and then you can have that take effect a year and a half down the road, so that then you have time to legislate a replacement. And that may have been what we should have done from the beginning. So to me, we've gone down this road enough. I think we got to see if we can get over the finish line with what they're working on. But if not, then I agree. I think we should just go back to that 2016 bill. Everyone's on record as already supporting that, and so do it, and then you have a window where you're able to legislate. Now, I don't think you're going to get a lot of help from Democrats on the replacement, but if you've already signed the repeal into law, then at least they would have an incentive to want to have some sense of this in the Senate, particularly some of those Democrats in Republican states.
Congressman, it's Heather Herzog. So I'm a small business owner, and you're talking about this time frame, maybe a year and a half. I just got a letter from my insurance company that said that my premiums are going to go up 38%, including my employees. What do you tell these small business owners who are waiting here? A year and a half is just not, it's not doable as a small business owner. And if you're going to sit there and go back to the original Obamacare, what do you tell these small business owners?
Well, I would, in terms of the burdens on small business, I think you repeal that immediately. I was saying about replacements, some of the things that have been talked about, you would just need a little bit of time to phase that in and give Congress time to legislate if you did the repeal first, then the replace later. But I want to do all this immediately. I don't think realistically anything that's done now is going to affect the 2018 rates just because the policies are already being formulated. But I think it is important to get this in place so that for the 2019 rates that are going to come out in fall of 2018, that people start to see some differences and see more options and more affordability. And so So I think that that's very important, and I don't think that there's a lot of time to waste in that respect. I would have liked to have done this in January. That would have been the easiest way to do it. That's what we promised.
What do you think about Rand Paul's argument that, look, the Republicans are going to go down with the spiraling down of Obamacare because this is not a full repeal? I recognize this is a lot to completely repeal it and then come out with a replacement later. The transition period is going to be tough and expensive, but I mean, you did promise a full repeal. What about Rand Paul's ideas? Don't jump on a falling ship.
Well, look, I will support a full repeal. That's what we should do. That's the #1 thing we promise. I think that's the easiest thing to do. I just know, Maria, from having talked to colleagues, and you've talked to members of Congress as well, you have some members who just will not support that right now. And so I can sit there and say that's the only thing I'll vote for. The problem is, if I can't get 218 votes for that, if they can't get the 50 votes in the Senate for that, and maybe there comes a time where we will be able to do that because the current product doesn't succeed in getting the votes, I don't know. But I can tell you, having gone through this debate when we did it in the spring, I was in conference meetings. We have Republican members who get up and just say, I want to repeal Obamacare, but I don't want to repeal this part or that part or the other part.
Right.
Well, when you start going that way, then basically you don't want to repeal it at all. So, yes, the clean repeal would have been the preferable route, and I would absolutely support that if that were put in front of us today.
Congressman, let me switch gears, get your reaction to the news overnight, and that is the president's travel ban. A federal judge in Hawaii is ruling that grandparents and other relatives should be exempt from the ban, which bars people from 6 Muslim countries from coming into the U.S. More specifically, this decision means that grandparents, grandchildren, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and cousins of those people in the U.S. now count as sufficiently close relationships to gain entry into the country. Do you agree with this? What do you make of the ruling?
So that's an Obama-appointed judge. His ruling initially on this basically was struck out by the Supreme Court when they stayed what they did. I think that this bona fide relationship that Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch dissented from, and they pointed out that this is not something that's really in the law. It's going to be difficult to administer. So I think they were right about that. I think the Supreme Court gave this window for liberal judges like this guy in Hawaii to drive a truck through. And the bottom line is he's not doing law. He's basically doing politics. He feels that cousins and second cousins and in-laws should be allowed to come in, even though the president's order says no. And to me, it's a policy issue that's important, but even more important is who should be making these decisions. Do we want the commander-in-chief with the authority from the Congress, the political branches who are accountable to the American people, or do we want some unelected judge making these determinations without really any basis in law? He's just asserting that this is the case. So I think it was a bad decision. I think it may end up getting revisited in the meantime by the Supreme Court or certainly higher courts, but I think ultimately what the Hawaii judge did will not be upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, Congressman, real quick on taxes. Is there conversations happening right now in terms of tax reform? Are you looking forward? Is there going to be as much debate on the tax package as there has been on health care?
So the goal is to get on the same page, and so things that I've been warning against, like a border adjustment tax, those seem to be waning, and I think we're going to move beyond things like that and hopefully have a consensus of principles. Let's start legislating this very soon, and I want to be debating and voting on this when we get back in September.
All right, we'll be watching. Congressman, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Ron DeSantis joining us there in Washington. Coming up, flooding in Wisconsin to tell you about details on the recovery efforts after the governor declares a state of emergency there. And then we're watching banks this morning. They are coming out with their second quarter earnings. Citigroup and JP Morgan among the institutions reporting before the opening bell this morning. We'll have those numbers, tell you what they say as soon as they hit the tape. The preview coming up. Breaking news out of Jerusalem this morning. Cheryl Casoni with the story. Cheryl.
Right. This happened within the last hour, Maria. 2 police officers are dead after a shootout with 3 gunmen at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites. The gunman also dead. Another person is hurt. We're learning this shootout happened at Temple Mount. It's a very popular place for tourists. Remember, President Trump and Melania, the First Lady, were just there a few weeks ago. Well, back here at home, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has declared a state of emergency for 3 counties, and he's also activated the National Guard after torrential rains have caused widespread flooding there. And then want to bring you this video now from Ohio, a driver being rescued from a car stranded in floodwaters. Look at this, incredible. The National Weather Service has extended a flood warning until later this morning for several parts of the state of Ohio. Well, in earnings news, season's kicking off today with several big U.S. banks set to report this morning. You've got J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all going to release their latest quarterly results. J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo expected to post higher earnings per share from a year ago, but analysts expect Citigroup's earnings to come in a little bit lower. We're going to have, of course, Maria, those numbers for you as soon as they are released. Trading revenue, big question here. Back to you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cheryl. Thank you. And, of course, we're also watching what happens next, Scott. In terms of these bank earnings, they've gotten the go-ahead to ramp up the dividends.
Yeah, ramp up the dividends. You just saw really good stress test results some weeks ago. What's interesting to me, Maria, is the interest rate curve. The interest rate curve with the Fed hiking is actually flattened, so the long end is starting to come down a little bit. It feels a little heavy. Remember the heart of the bank earnings situation. Borrowing short from the Fed, lending long to us, the consumers. They make that spread. The Fed is hiking the short end, and the long end is coming down. So that spread is narrowing, therefore putting pressure on bank earnings.
So you worried about this quarter?
This quarter I am concerned about because there hasn't been that favorable move in interest rates. But there is a chance that with some confidence back in the economy, you've seen business confidence numbers, consumer confidence numbers. Heatha knows this being a small businesswoman. The demand for loans is there. But are banks willing to lend? That's the other thing, too, that we haven't seen in the last few quarters.
But these, you know, to your point, yes, you're totally right. But these net interest margins are the 60-year low here. Isn't that having a positive impact on these banks? I mean, isn't that what they watch? And that's what ostensibly they want.
That's true. And also, if you think about it this way, too, I mean, the banks have stepped out of the freezer with respect to how they were, you know, some years after the financial crisis. The other thing, too, is the market, by and large, has been pretty favorable to the financials in the last, say, 30 to 45 days. Remember, because this was a tech-led rally for many months of the year, and then you started seeing tech fade, and then all of a sudden the banks stepped to the forefront to pick up some of that slack. Does that continue through this earnings season? We'll see. But this could be a preview of coming attractions to what could be a good second half for the banks.
Watch the trading revenue. The CFO of J.P. Morgan Chase, we should point out, said that trading revenue had fallen about 15%. This was as of late May, but investors want some sort of guidance not only in the second quarter, but in quarters to come. We should point out, though, that at least in terms of J.P. Morgan, that the earnings per share estimates have been all over the place, that they were at a high of, I think, $1.66 a share earlier, and they've come down. So maybe because they've come down, getting closer to the earnings date, that I guess any potential bad news would be priced in at this point.
Well, you mentioned, you know, trading volatility has been nowhere, right? I mean, that's certainly something that the banks would have liked to see in this last quarter, but it's been really quiet.
Yeah, and think about investment banking, too. I mean, how many IPOs have been this year?
Yeah.
There's not been
M&A
many.
has slowed down as
weak,
well.
And so,
right?
so far, it's been kind of a ho-hum year for banks.
We'll see about that. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, President Trump attending the Bastille Day parade in Paris this morning before headed back home to tackle health care and taxes. We'll take a look at investor reaction to his agenda straight ahead. And then one mainstream media company curbing what their reporters can say on Twitter. The controversial new policy. Stay with us.
Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting star.
Welcome back. The Washington Post implementing a new policy concerning the behavior of its employees on social media. Tracy Carrasco with the story now. Tracy, good morning.
Good morning, Maria. Yes, the Washington Post, owned by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, has implemented a controversial new employee policy that prohibits conduct on social media that, quote, adversely affects the Post customers, advertisers, subscribers, vendors, suppliers, or partners. In such cases, Post management reserves the right to take disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. All of this reported first by the Washingtonian. The Post union employees not happy with this keep your opinion to yourself policy and are working to revise it. The policy went into effect on May 1st and applies to the entire company. A spokesperson for the Post tells us Jeff Bezos was not part of the executive team that determined the policy. The rules perhaps a move to curb criticism of the Bezos-owned paper, as people worldwide have become reluctant to buy what many established news organizations are selling. This gets into a tricky territory. territory here.
So, in other words, this is about the mainstream media and what they've been doing, Dagan. And now people are reacting to the mainstream media, and then there's fights on Twitter and on social media.
I think that any adult who can't control themselves on social media has bigger problems.
Yeah.
And, 'cause it does get ugly. I mean,
Yeah,
you've seen some individual reporters fly off the handle with other reporters, you name it. And I think that I look at it like, if you want to keep your job, you better careful who you attack on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why do you need that guidance to do that exactly? I mean, why do you need a reminder to keep it, keep it clear here, keep it adult? I mean, the also thing too is the Washington Post, maybe that's a little CYA on their part to say, hey, if you went off the handle on social media, now we have the right to discipline you or do something because we told you that this was against company policy.
Well, think about it too. I mean, advertising revenue is how the paper makes money, and if you're going to be a threat to that, of course they're going to come down on that. But to your point, I mean, it's 2017 now. It's a different set of rules. I mean, you would think that people would have this decorum, the way we even interact with people. I mean, listen, I wouldn't fly off the handle to someone just because I was angry in person, but I feel like Twitter has this shield, and it makes you think that you can just react any way you want.
The last company that I called out, it actually wasn't the company, but it was a Delta Gate agent who was so hideously rude to this group of people who had just missed their connection.
I remember that tweet.
Yeah, they had just missed their connection, and I said, the woman working at this gate at this airport, this flight was really nasty to a bunch of your customers.
Did they reply? Do you remember?
They did acknowledge it, and actually were direct messaging me trying to find out the woman's name.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Yeah,
Interesting.
She deserved it.
And it's shocking that something would go wrong at the airlines. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, it's probably...
But you know,
that never happens to me.
It's always the passenger, but I've never actually taken a photo of an unruly passenger and tweeted it, but maybe next time.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because there's one on every flight.
That is wild. Tracy, thank you. Tracy Carrasco. Coming up, the Congressional Budget Office scores President Trump's budget. The results after this break. And then Honda recalling over 1 million cars, the model where the sensor batteries could potentially set fire. Straight ahead. Back in a moment. Welcome back. Good Friday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Friday, July 14th, Bastille Day. Your top stories right now, 6:30 a.m. on the East Coast. France puts on a show for President Trump, a Bastille Day military parade, closing out his trip to Paris this morning. The president set to leave for home shortly with a renewed focus on his agenda. He spoke optimistically about tax reform during his new interview with Pat Robertson.
They're bringing corporate taxes down to 15%. I hope we can get that number approved. Maybe they'll want to do something and negotiate, but we will have, if we get what we want, it'll be the biggest tax cut and the greatest tax reform in the history of our country.
The president believes revamping the tax code will be much easier than overhauling health care. We're watching that one. But the CBO's new report on the administration's budget proposal might indicate otherwise. New doubts this morning cast on the White House claims that its plan will balance the budget by 2027. More than 1 million Honda Accords need to go into the shop this morning. The model year is under recall for a dangerous battery fire risk. We'll tell you about it. And markets this morning all focused on bank earnings. That is the focus this morning. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, all out with their second quarter numbers before the opening bell this morning. As soon as those numbers hit the tape, we will bring them to you. They could be market moving. Other averages, take a look at futures indicating a lower opening for the broader averages right now. We are coming off of another record close for the Dow yesterday. The 24th record high for the Dow Industrials reached yesterday. Today we're expecting a bit of a pullback, as you see there. In Europe, mixed performances today to tell you about. The European indices look like this. FT 100 down 0.25%. The other majors really flat on the session. In Asia overnight, gains across the board. Fractional moves, nonetheless, in the plus column. Also, apes go to war with Spider-Man at the box office this weekend. We're taking you behind the scenes for a look at the new Planet of the Apes sequel hitting theaters this weekend. All those stories coming up this morning, and joining me to talk all about it, Fox Business Network's Dagan McDowell, Kingsview Asset Management Chief Investment Officer Scott Martin, and H Squared Research Chief Research Officer Heath Herzog is here. Great to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.
TGIF, it is Friday, and we are talking about tax reform again. That's our top story this half an hour. What did you want to say, Jake?
Amen.
Amen, exactly. President Trump optimistic about his plan for a tax code overhaul, especially when it is compared to the fight to repeal and replace Obamacare. Here's what he had to say in his recent interview with Pat Robertson.
I think after healthcare, taxes are going to be so easy. It really, healthcare is very hard. Healthcare is hard because you'll do something a little bit this way, and you'll pick up that final vote, and you'll lose 4 votes over here. Now you move it back. It's this very tiny little road. It's about 2 feet wide, and it goes throughout the country. So healthcare is much tougher than taxes. No, I think taxes are going to be very well. In fact, our plan is we're talking about massive tax cuts, the biggest tax cut in the history of our country.
Joining us this morning is Americans for Tax Reform President Grover Norquist. And Grover, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for weighing in this morning. Do you think tax reform is going to be as easy as the president says?
Well, he's quite correct that it's going to be a lot easier than health care. I mean, there was a lot of special interest money in Obamacare that bought off all the various interest groups. I mean, this was a plan that was written by the interest groups for the benefit of the interest groups in Washington, D.C., and $1 trillion was thrown at it. So you can imagine the opposition that those Republicans that are trying to get Obamacare repealed have run into. On tax reform, it's one-dimensional. Taxes up or down. Healthcare is regulations, taxes, spending. It's three-dimensional.
Yeah, but that's not exactly true. I mean, Grover, when you look at this idea that some people would like to see this revenue neutral, they want to see revenue somewhere. As you lower taxes, they want to see revenue somewhere else, like a border adjustment tax. Or maybe there's a debate on the corporate rate. Is it going to be the president's 15%, or is it going to be Paul Ryan's 25%? And then there are all those deductions. So there are going to be a fair amount of fights in terms of what deduction stays, what deduction goes.
Yes, but they're about, are we going this direction or that direction further? And that's an easier debate to have. You're quite right. Look, they're very important things to decide. I think the president is quite correct that a 15% rate is where they should start, both on corporate income and subchapter S pass-through income, on all business income, 15%. That makes us competitive with the rest of the world. It makes special interest deductions less interesting or important to anybody. You don't fight for them if it's only a 15% rate instead of 35%, the present 35% rate. Taking the corporate rate down to 15% also takes the corporate capital gains tax down to 15%. That's going to be a tremendous, there's so much growth to be unleashed that there's some real opportunities on health care. We did, as we move forward, we do have to decide, is this going to be revenue neutral over 10 years or at the end of 10 years, or a deficit neutral at the end of 10 years, 25 years? There are a number of ways to make the tax cut longer lasting, more permanent, and deeper that are within the power of the House, Senate, and the White House.
Grover, let's talk about personal rates. You know, with respect to, you know, something that was circulating a couple weeks ago, Steve Bannon talking about maybe raising the high-end rate with respect to bringing down some of the middle class tax rates. Is that still out there? And does that complicate this simplicity of saying, okay, we're going to cut taxes across the board, but then there's going to be rates that may be moving up or down within that proposal?
No. First of all, the president has said nobody's rates are going up. Almost all the Republicans in the House and Senate have signed the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, which is a commitment to the American people that they will never raise marginal tax rates. So it wasn't an interesting idea. It wasn't a good idea. It's not something that they're looking at going forward. I don't know why it popped up the way it did, but we're going to reduce rates, and this is a consensus issue among the House, Senate, and the White House. All rates are coming down. No rates are going up. And the only debate is how far we can get rates down for individuals as well as for companies and pass-throughs.
Well, Grover, the way that the Senate health care bill stands as it is now, these Republicans are standing by Obamacare tax increases. On investments, the investment income tax, 3.8%, and this is on wealthier Americans, stays. 9 percentage point tax, payroll tax, stays. How do these Republicans look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm for these tax increases?
It's pretty bizarre. What we have is almost all of the Obamacare taxes get repealed. It's a wonderful list of all these stupid tax increases that are being repealed under everybody's plan. But it appears they're going to leave those two taxes that you talked about, the 3.8% capital gains tax and a special surcharge tax, in for right now. Tax reform is when those two bad ideas can and should be taken out. everyone I've talked to said, yes, we want to get rid of them. Some of them felt they didn't want to do it in the middle of tax reform, because that makes it too complicated in their mind. But there is a tax cut, tax reform bill. You cannot reform taxes and leave that 3.8, which is a direct attack on a lot of smaller businesses and pass-through Subchapter S companies. Very damaging, anti-growth tax increase.
Mr. Norquist,
it's got to go.
Yeah. Mr. Norquist, respectfully, it's Heather Herzog. I still don't understand where this revenue is coming from. So you're going to reduce personal taxes. You're going to reduce the corporate tax rate. Where is the revenue going to come from?
Well, that's the debate. Do you need something? Do you want something to be revenue neutral, or how long a period do you have the window before it has to be deficit neutral? The law says after the window, you can set the window up at 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. We've been doing 10 years recently, but it's been 5 and 7 before. There's nothing sacrosanct about 10 years. You could do 25 years. You could do 2,500 years under the law. So the goal is to get deep, pro-growth tax cuts for as long as you can, as permanently as you can, as quickly as you can. And we need growth going into the 2018 election and the 2020 election.
Right.
And we need growth because there are millions of Americans who, during the Obama years, never got jobs when the recession formally ended. It didn't end for them.
So what do you make of the CBO then? I mean, the Congressional Budget Office is casting doubt over the president's budget proposal this morning. The CBO said yesterday that the federal deficit would total $720 billion in 2027 under the plan, compared to White House estimates of a $16 billion surplus. This difference is that the Trump administration is projecting healthier economic growth than the CBO is. So you're saying we need growth. Yeah, the White House is estimating 2.8% growth under the president's policies compared to the CBO's 1.9% growth. Yeah. That's what the difference is in terms of the CBO score. But if the CBO is saying it's not balancing the budget, Grover, is this going to be an issue?
Look, Congress can direct joint tax, which is the key decision maker for how tax reform takes place, how to make these decisions. It doesn't have to defer to joint tax. But one of the things we're going to have to do when this is over, we're not going to do it in the middle of this debate, is rethink CBO's models and joint taxes models. Those models need to be transparent, and they need to explain why they were so wrong about Obamacare, why they were so wrong about each of the tax and spending issues in the past. CBO has a very bad track record in their estimates about what's going to happen. And until they can apologize to the American people by being off by a factor of 2 on how many people were going to get Obamacare and on how much it was going to cost and so on, why would you organize your reforms around what you know are faulty estimates? And they haven't even corrected the mistakes they made in the past, never mind apologize to the Congress and the Senate and the American people for having been so dramatically off and for politicizing their decisions to make Obamacare look better when they either knew better than that and were lying, or they're not any good at their job. And they've really got to, I mean, there should be congressional hearings on the failures of CBO and to question joint tax on their model so that the next time we do this, we have better models. I would like competing models. I don't mind if CBO wants to do it, but we should have private models out there that can compete. And then when you look and say CBO got it wrong, but these other people got it right, then we don't need CBO if they're going to get wrong like that.
It certainly has been really up for criticism. Grover, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Take care, Maria.
We'll see you soon. Grover Norquist joining us there. Coming up, Roku reportedly looking to switch to on an IPO. The live streaming media player's eye-popping valuation next. And then House of Cards snags an Emmy nomination for Best Drama. The other breakout shows that top the list. Straight ahead. Back in a minute.
My hands up in the air sometimes, saying, ayo, gotta let go.
Well, welcome back. Quiet day in terms of futures this morning. Take a look at markets this morning after another record high reached yesterday for the Dow Industrials. We're looking at a fractional pullback. This is off of the lows of the morning, and we're waiting on bank earnings, so that may very well change the story. A couple of names we're watching. Shares of Mylan this morning making strides on its own generic version of a breast cancer drug. The drug maker says that the FDA Advisory Committee is recommending approval of the drug. Mylan shares down nearly 15% in the last year. could see a pop today. Microsoft wants to bring Skype to your car's dashboard. The technology giant announcing yesterday that BMW is working to implement its Skype for Business through the built-in entertainment system in the BMW, so drivers can take phone calls. Microsoft shares are up 33% in the last year. Honda is announcing a recall. Cheryl Casoni with the details there. Cheryl, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Maria. So Honda is recalling more than 1 million of its Accords because a battery sensor can short out and possibly cause a fire. This recall covering the 2013 to 2016 model years. Honda says it knows of 4 engine fires right now. Luckily, nobody has been hurt thus far. All of the fires in states where salt is used during the winter to clear the roads, that salt can cause an electrical short. So Honda's going to replace any faulty sensors, and we should say the stock right now is down nearly 6% so far in 2017. Stock to watch today. Well, there might be a new stock to tell you about. Roku is reportedly planning an initial public offering before the end of the year. The Wall Street Journal says the streaming device maker is seeking a valuation of, get this, $1 billion. Roku recently hired Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, and Allen & Company as underwriters on the IPO. Plus, there is this.
The American people don't know what's best for them. I do. I know exactly what they need.
Oh, Frank. Well, HBO and Netflix have done it again, Maria. They led the Emmy nominations. HBO claiming first place, though, with 110 nods. Netflix, though, 91. We should also add that HBO's Game of Thrones, which won for Best Drama the last 2 years, didn't make the cut this year because of the later start date. But back to House of Cards. Or not. Anyway, I was kind of happy about it.
I love it.
I know, I love that show.
You love it too, don't you, Dagan?
I love it. And I love the Great British Bake Off. One of the new seasons is on PBS, and I'm using the PBS app to stream it.
Cool.
And it's fantastic.
All right, I'll have to check that out. We'll take a break. When we come back, no monkeying around this time. The latest installment of Planet of the Apes hitting theaters. But can it beat for the #1 spot at the box office? We'll bring you the weekend preview next.
History has led to this moment. The irony is we created you. And nature has been punishing us ever since.
All right, that was a clip from the War for the Planet of the Apes, which marches into theaters today. This is the final installment in 20th Century Fox's refurbished trilogy. It is expected to rake in more than $60 million opening weekend. Joining me right now in the Fox Lighthouse, Senior Vice President of Marketing here at Fox News, Michael Tamaro. Michael, this looks good.
Oh, it is good, Maria.
Yeah, did you like it?
It's probably the best of the trilogy so far, sort of wraps up this trilogy. It's one of the better reviewed of the 3 movies. And what I loved about this franchise is each movie gets better and better, and they always show you something that you haven't seen in the previous film. And this one in particular plays homage, I love that word, to the original 1968 version. So throughout the movie, you're going to be like, oh, so that's how that happened. You're going to be doing that a lot.
And you sat down with the main players.
I did. I sat down with Andy Serkis, who's like a motion capture genius. He plays Caesar, and director Matt Reeves, who told me all about this latest installment.
Apes together, strong.
We've seen them rise, we've seen their dawn, and now it's time for war.
Where do we find Caesar after the last one?
Well, at the end of Dawn, we saw the apes on the brink of war, and now we pick up 3 years later, and they have been suffering. They're in a really bad way. They're clinging on for survival, as are the humans.
And he is trying to find some way to get through this. He gets pushed by the extremes of war to a place that he's never been pushed before.
No mercy, no peace. This is war.
In the cycle of these films, like if you think of this as like a trilogy that's about Caesar, that last leg has to be the thing that turns him into the ape Moses, the seminal figure of ape history, who all apes will look back to and say, like, wow, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here.
I did not start this war. I fight only to protect apes.
He he follows this dark journey.
He really
for a
does.
good part of the movie. What was that like as an actor?
It was amazing to actually get to this point of Caesar's life and then suddenly to become a completely other different being. And then combined with that was his evolutionary journey. It's a very heady, complex mix, and that was just fascinating to play.
Have you come to save your apes? I came for you.
So good and intense. Woody Harrelson, talk to us, Maria.
Woody Harrelson.
Woody, baby, come on.
That is awesome.
I'm a gentle little fella.
Okay, what about Spider-Man, though? I mean, Spider-Man Homecoming came out last weekend. It has been dominating the box office, grossing over $117 million. How does this compare?
It's going to be neck and neck. It's going to be tight. Even if Spider-Man falls 40, 50%, it will still be right up there, about $50, $60 million, which is what War for Planet of the Apes is expected to bring in this weekend.
And then there's Wonder Woman. They don't call her Wonder Woman for nothing. So the summer blockbuster boasts the best hold of any superhero film in 15 years.
Yeah. Pretty incredible.
Pretty
I mean, you and I
amazing.
both agreed after we saw Batman versus Superman that Gal Gadot was the best thing about that movie.
Yeah.
And people are really responding to this audience.
Are we seeing women take on stronger roles in Hollywood, you think?
You know, I think it's a great time to be a woman in Hollywood. The roles are so much better, even though 2016 was down from 2015 in terms of leading roles for women. It comprised about 29% of the overall roles in the top 100 box office movies. But the characters are just so great. You know, when I left Star Wars, The Force Awakens, I caught, it had to be an 8-year-old girl with her father. And she said, "Dad, it's so great to see the girl lead beat up the guy in a movie." And I was just like, wow, it's sort of a good time to be raising girls right now. Yeah.
That's great. That's a great analogy. Michael, good to see you.
Good to see
We'll
you.
be watching the slate of movies this weekend for sure. We have breaking news right now. I want to get to JP Morgan Chase earnings and revenue, both above expectations. The numbers are better than expected here. Second quarter, $25.5 billion in revenue. That compares to $24.9 billion expectation. In terms of earnings per share, $1.82 a share versus an estimate of $1.58. In the release, JP Morgan Chase Chairman and CEO Jamie Dimon says that the U.S. consumer remains healthy. He is noting that market revenue was down amid lower volatility, which is, of course, what we predicted. Having said that, the numbers are better than expected. The stock is up 1.25%. That's a big move. That's a Dow component. This is probably going to lift the broader markets this morning as well. So we'll check the broader markets to see any change in terms of futures. Can we show futures right now before we head to a break real quick on futures? Okay, so it's been down this morning. We'll see if this turns around given the fact that JPM is up better than 1% right now on these better than expected numbers for the second quarter. We'll take a break. When we come back, more on the bank earnings, setting the tone for markets this morning. Stay with us right here.
You can see a lack of economic opportunity and an increase in Medicaid. You also see an increase in opioid addiction. And going from $2 billion to $45 billion is a big step in the right direction. Now, Democrats are saying that 1 in 3 people who are addicted to opioids are covered by Medicaid, and that's absolutely true. But Yellen is also right that you have to address the economic opportunity issue that's here, that's dovetailed with the opioid addiction.
So hey, Allie, it's Heatha. So as a small business owner, and especially a millennial small business owner, where do you see reform going for this? I mean, would you want to see some sort of tax break for that small business owner, or where do you see it going?
Yeah, I think so. But also, this is such an intangible conversation. You don't think it is when we talk about taxes and we talk about healthcare. We want to know the solutions, but also tying purpose to a young person, especially a young person, it eliminates or it decreases that chance of them becoming addicted to opioids or really any kind of drug. And so the economy is always the answer to these kinds of things. It's something that the Democrats don't want to talk about. We want to talk about expanding Medicare or Medicaid, and we want to talk about expanding things like Obamacare, but it just doesn't work. We've seen that time and again. But actually giving kids hope and giving young people hope and giving them jobs and better education is really going to be the solution to this.
I'm going to say something controversial, but it's something that no one brings up, where they talk about this opioid crisis being that the solution is more money, but no one ever talks about personal responsibility and the responsibility of parents to make sure that their children don't start using opiate-based drugs when they're young. And it also hurts the very people, the way that so far that opioid prescriptions have been cracked down upon. It hurts the very people, quite frankly, who need these drugs, like cancer patients, for example, people with severe chronic pain that is untreatable otherwise. Personal responsibility, even on the right, is something that no one ever brings up when they talk about this.
No, absolutely. And that's something we don't want to talk about because it's something that's very hard to regulate. And like I said, it's very intangible. But those are the things that we need to be investing our time and energy into rather than doing something like expanding Medicaid or even giving $45 billion to address this. There are better ways that we can spend our energy actually educating and mentoring and helping kids learn, not just don't take drugs, but take personal responsibility, and your life is going to be exponentially better.
Well, Allie, this is Scott Martin. I think the tough thing, obviously, is getting the kids off the drugs, but also keeping them off. I mean, is the country prepared for the spend and the effort in just not only getting the kids off the drugs, but keeping them off going forward, whether it is a parental responsibility, as Dagan mentioned? I mean, what are the costs? What's the effort there with respect to moving forward beyond once a child or a young person is off the drugs itself?
Well, I think at some point, like we mentioned earlier, you do have to take on that personal responsibility. Now, what the cost for the country is, I'm not exactly sure, except for what we keep on going back to is creating jobs. And we have a president who said that he was going to address the opioid and the drug epidemic through creating jobs and creating a better economy. And giving kids that kind of hope, that's going to cost us much less over time than just having them on Medicaid or just providing them with entitlements. Them taking that personal responsibility and us providing them with jobs, us doing things like promoting trade schools and promoting technical colleges, that is going to lead to a better future for young people and taking on that personal responsibility and shunning things like addiction to opioid and drugs than anything else ever can.
Allie, Yellen's comments are a day when the Justice Department announced a big push against healthcare fraud, charging more than 400 people, including doctors, with prescription opioid abuse. The day before, Attorney General Jeff Sessions called for bringing back the anti-drug program, DARE. That was founded in the 1980s, and it's well known among millennials. Good idea here?
Not exactly. So statistics show that DARE actually didn't really help at all. It didn't prevent teens from using drugs. And I hate to beat a dead horse because I've said this over and over again, but if you don't want someone to use drugs, you have to give them something that's better. You have to provide them with something else. Kids aren't going to not use drugs simply because their parents or their teachers tell them not to. It's got to be more than education. You've got to provide them with something more. So it goes back to providing them with the opportunity to go to trade school or go to a technical college or get a job out of high school. There are so many economic and even family issues within this that need to be addressed so much more deeply and more primarily than just giving them curriculum. Yeah. The stats show that it just doesn't work, unfortunately.
All right, Allie, great insights from you. Thank you so much. Allie Stuckey joining us there. Just want to point out, Scott Martin, we were talking about J.P. Morgan Chase because the company reported better than expected earnings and revenue. This stock is up 33% since the election, Scott. I mean, I know that the numbers are very strong. But would you buy this stock today?
I would, and here's why. Because it's not just an interest rate issue anymore. It's showing that the loan demand is up. Now, what's interesting about your comment about how well the stock's done, the stock rocketed up. If you look at that chart there, rocketed up November 9th, right? When Trump got in, we had a repeat. We were pulling back the Dodd-Frank regulations.
Yeah,
exactly. It was going to be a growing economy, and then it's kind of flatlined. Build that base. I mean, look at that chart again. Looks pretty good. Now it's making that next leg up. So I would buy J.P. Morgan. I'd buy some of the other financials, too, because it looks like that loan portfolio is pretty strong.
All right, the earnings and the revenue above expectations this morning. Stock is on the move.
Yeah, and the dividend looks quite attractive.
And the dividend looks attractive. Probably going to see a dividend increase.
Buybacks.
There's certainly a buyback.
They announced buybacks at the end of June.
More usage of that cash. Meanwhile, the president is in Paris. President Trump was a guest of honor this morning as the European nation celebrates Bastille Day. Today also marks 1 year since the truck attack in Nice that killed 86 people. Fox News' chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live this morning in Paris on the ground. John, good morning to you.
Maria, good morning to you. The president on his way back to the United States is going to his Bedminster Golf Club rather than back to the White House, tweeting this morning, quote, "It was a great honor to represent the United States at the magnificent Bastille Day parade. Congratulations, President Emmanuel Macron." The president was the guest of honor here for this Bastille Day, which in part was to mark the 100th anniversary of the entry of the United States into World War I back in 1917. The parade led off with a group of U.S. troops, some 200 among them, from the various military services, including 5 soldiers who were dressed in the uniforms that soldiers wore back in the Great War of 1914 to 1918. And French President Macron very thankful that the United States made the decision that it did then to get in the war, because the history of France may be very different had the United States not engaged. This was also to mark defiance against radical Islamic terrorism, because it is the 1-year anniversary, as you mentioned at the top, of that horrific terror attack in the coastal city of Nice, when a terrorist took a truck and used it as a weapon, mowing down some 500 people, killing 86 of them. At one point, a precision marching band before the reviewing stand where Presidents Trump and Macron were spelled out the words Nice. Very touching moment there. And then there was the moment where the U.S. and French flags were displayed on the Champs-Élysées at the entrance to the Place de la Concorde. And President Macron, taking the microphone, talked about the enduring friendship between the United States and France, saying that the president of Donald Trump at his right shoulder was a testament to the fact that this friendship will stand the test of time. While it was all about pomp and circumstance and remembrance today, yesterday in their bilateral meeting, there was some points of disagreement, in particular over the Paris Climate Accord. In the run-up to the French election, Emmanuel Macron was very critical of the president's decision to withdraw from the Paris Accord, calling it a mistake, tweeting out that we need to make the planet great again. In their dual press conference yesterday, President Trump suggested, well, maybe U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord isn't a completely done deal. Listen here to what he said.
Something could happen with respect to the Paris Accord. We'll see what happens. But we will talk about that over the coming period of time. And if it happens, that'll be wonderful. And if it doesn't, that'll be okay, too. But we'll see what happens.
So it may be, Maria, that President Trump is using the threat of a withdrawal as leverage to try to get a better deal. French President Macron said despite their disagreement, he wasn't going to let that get in the way of the bigger relationship. The two leaders really did seem to hit it off today. We'll see where this goes. Maria?
All right, John, thank you. John Roberts live this morning in Paris. Coming up, another surgery for Steve Scalise to tell you about. The House Majority Whip upgraded to fair condition after fighting an infection stemming from that shooting. The very latest along his path to recovery next. And then playtime is over for JCPenney, the retailer's big bet on toys to combat the retail slump. Back in a minute.
Mornings with Maria is brought to you by Sector Spider ETFs. Visit them on the web at sectorspdrs.com or call 866-SECTOR-ETF.
Well, the circus that is the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor pre-fight promotional world tour rolled into New York City last night, and Dagan McDowell was on the scene. Dagan.
That's right, Maria, the most high-profile bout ever, featuring a mixed martial artist who is going to box maybe one of the greatest boxers of all time. It's vowing to set pay-per-view records, and the hype machine that's preceding this mega bout made its third stop in as many nights last night in Brooklyn, and did not disappoint the thousands in attendance.
And there they are, ladies and gentlemen, just announced. July 24th tickets go on sale. Mayweather versus McGregor.
We're at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York for stop 3 of the McGregor-Mayweather press tour. You think New Yorkers know how to trash talk? You ain't seen nothing yet.
5 weight classes. And y'all choose a quitter?
Looking good, baby. Deserve better.
New York City, you want to see them face off? This is what you've been waiting for. August 26th. That's a $3 million fighter. It's an $800 million fighter.
You and 50. He's bankrupt, and you're about to be.
Is this more professional wrestling or Muhammad Ali? Is it Ric Flair instead of Ali?
No, I think it's just that you have, when it comes to Conor McGregor, I think that I personally have a tremendous amount of respect for his skill set and what he's been able to do over there in the UFC. And with him being very confident, You know, it comes with the swag, the whole thing, and basically, he's a big fan of Floyd's.
Does this pull more MMA fighters, UFC fighters over into boxing, just given the size of just given the payday?
God, I hope not. But yeah, I mean, this is something that I'm going to be dealing with for the next 3 years. Everybody's going to want to box somebody now. But just because, you know, this fight is happening, this is two of the right guys in the right place at the right time.
Will this be a record pay-per-view? Will this be #1 at the end of the day?
It's difficult to say whether this will break the existing record. Mayweather-Pacquiao did 4.6 million buys, which really was a level that no one expected we could ever reach. We could have something here that really could threaten or surpass it.
So let's talk about these potential pay-per-view records. The pay-per-view costs a little under $100. It's a little bit under $100. 2015 was the record for pay-per-view, 4.6 million pay-per-view buys. So far, the way this is tracking, the odds makers, the bookmakers in Las Vegas think the pay-per-view could be 4.9 million. It could be more, but the whole point of this, the trash talk and everything, is to convince the public that Conor McGregor has a shot at actually defeating the best defensive boxer of all time, Floyd Mayweather. Conor McGregor, he's a fighter, but he's never had a professional boxing match. These are pretty heavy gloves. They're 10-ounce gloves. Now, McGregor...
He's never had a professional boxing match. How is he going to go up against Floyd Mayweather?
But he's been in MMA professional.
Right.
So much more technical.
But it's a very different thing. Yes,
But I will say one thing. Let me quote Conor McGregor. Precision beats power. Timing beats speed. That is his approach to landing a punch. Can it happen? I mean, I could go on and on and on about this. I will say last night, these two knuckleheads showed up late and missed the entire rope line. They did show up for this, but this started about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours late.
Oh, lovely.
So, and it lacked the kind of energy and zazz that the presser in Los Angeles and Toronto had. They go on to London today, but they better keep up the steam and keep up the heat.
Let me ask you this. How much could Floyd Mayweather make?
He made,
what are the numbers
total
here?
Because Mayweather Promotions is promoting this bout. Floyd Mayweather, who allegedly owes the IRS about $22 million, could bring in $250 million from this.
It puts his career earnings over $1 billion.
Conor McGregor.
Conor McGregor.
Conor McGregor. There is one reason he is getting into the ring with Floyd Mayweather, and that is money. He's probably going to make north of $100 million
if he wins or he doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
Just for getting
to the $100 million regardless.
Wow. Yeah, roughly $100 million.
His career earnings, McGregor's are roughly. His career earnings in the UFC is about $9 million, so he'll easily exceed that in one fight. Even to your point, Heather, even if he takes the first punch and drops to the canvas.
That is
I mean, how great is that? I would sign up for that. If you would hit me, Maria, I'll take that money.
There are a lot of questions to be answered. We can talk about it later, but Conor McGregor's birthday is today. He is very young, 29. Floyd Mayweather, 40.
Yep.
Wow.
So that's some of the advantage. He's got height. He's got a 2-inch additional reach over Floyd Mayweather, and he's a heck of a lot younger.
Wow,
that's not a professional boxer.
Sounds like Dagan's money.
Floyd Mayweather had lifts on. He had like platform sneakers on the stage last night.
Cool.
Just saying.
That must have been fun. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, overhauling health care, Republican lawmakers unveiling a new draft. We're taking a look at the changes on the other side of this break. And then Fed Chair Janet Yellen testifies for a second day on the Hill yesterday. Her comments from the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday. Back in a moment.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
Welcome back. Good Friday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Friday, July 14th. Your top stories right now, 7:30 a.m. on the East Coast. President Trump closes out his trip to Paris with a bang. France putting on a military parade to mark Bastille Day today. The president is now leaving for home shortly with a renewed focus on his domestic agenda. He released a flurry of tweets this morning talking about health care, his message to Senate leaders about the importance of repealing and replacing Obamacare. Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen draws a roadmap for more rate hikes and the balance sheet wind down how markets are reacting to her testimony before the Senate yesterday and the House Financial Services Committee the day before. Bank earnings in focus this morning. JPMorgan Chase delivering a big double beat this morning. The company reported earnings and revenue above expectations. Now, the stock is trading down now. Earlier, initially, when the numbers first came out, the stock was up better than 1%. And as you see right now, it's pulling back right now, almost 1/2% lower. We're breaking down the numbers as we await earnings from Wells Fargo and Citigroup as well. Markets look like this, really flat on the session. Dow Industrials saw a brief pop on the heels of the JPM numbers, but have since reversed and are in negative territory. We are coming off of a record close for the Dow Industrials. Of course, yesterday, the 24th record high reached yesterday, 24th this year. Vice President Mike Pence spoke about the stock market rally yesterday. Listen.
There's been almost a $3 trillion increase in stock market value since the outset of this administration. American people are more confident in many quarters than ever before, and you see that reflected in the stock market and investments that Americans are making.
In Europe this morning, mixed performances. FT100 is down 0.25%. The other majors are up, but just by a fraction. In Asia overnight, gains across the board. Here, too, though, fractional moves very close to the unchanged line. An unexpected withdrawal. A Texas repairman gets trapped inside an ATM machine. How he let customers know that he was stuck inside the machine and what took place then. Plus, Beyonce's fans crazy in love with the pop star's new twins, their adorable debut on social media. We will bring you the pictures coming up. First, though, our top story this half an hour, the battle to overhaul Obamacare. President Trump ramping up the pressure on Republican senators, tweeting this morning. So important, Republican senators under leadership of Senate Majority Leader McConnell get health care plan approved after 7 years of Obamacare disaster. Must happen, according to the president. The bill now has 2 no votes, including Senator Rand Paul, who we heard from yesterday. He told me on this program yesterday he's a no, and here's why.
You know, I pledged to the voters to repeal Obamacare. I think it's a disaster, but the bill doesn't repeal it. It keeps about half of the Obamacare taxes. It keeps most of the Obamacare regulations. It keeps most of the Obamacare subsidies, and it creates a giant new insurance bailout super fund of about $200 billion. This isn't repeal by any means, shape, or form.
Joining me now with reaction, Congressman French Hill in D.C. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. How are you?
What about that? How could you support a bill that keeps all of these subsidies, keeps the Obamacare taxes, and creates a whole new entitlement program, as Senator Rand Paul just said?
Well, last night the Senate just released their draft, and I'm sure members of the House are going to be studying it today and see the reaction in the Senate. The main objective that we have in both houses is to lower health costs for our families, where premiums have skyrocketed, deductibles have skyrocketed, and choices have collapsed. So that's the goal, and we'll be looking at the Senate's bill in respect to those goals.
Okay, so in other words, it's not a goal of yours necessarily to remove the taxes in Obamacare.
Well, I think in the House, Senator Rand Paul makes a good point, which is that in the House bill, we repeal all the taxes and we dismantle the regulatory regime, or the bulk of it, with an eye that we want to shift powers back to the states, creativity and flexibility back to the states. So it's true that in this Senate draft released last night, where they maintain some of those taxes, in my view, that'll be controversial here in the House.
Congressman, the Wall Street Journal editorial page describes this, keeping these tax increases in the Senate bill as the GOP essentially capitulating to progressive opposition. Moderate Republicans folded amid a false, if completely predictable, tax cuts for the rich narrative. So now the question remains, how does this play out when you actually go to sit down and do tax reform? Because again, this is a tax and spend liberalism that is the Republicans are trying to present as helping the middle class.
Exactly right. Well, by cutting the taxes and reducing the regulations, we think it lowers the price of health care, the access to health care, and we need the Senate's help in creating a more competitive health care marketplace. You make good points, and it's going to, as I say, it'll be controversial here in the House in this most recent draft by the Senate.
Congressman, let's move forward in time here. I'm concerned. I mean, look at the razor-thin margin that's in the Senate right now with respect to the votes. Let's say it doesn't pass. What happens after that? You got a recess coming up. We got a lot of things that have been promised by the president, including regulatory reform, tax reform. What do you think happens if this thing doesn't pass the Senate?
Well, I think members in both houses want to reform the failings of the Affordable Care Act. The law is broken. People are being failed. Families are being hurt. So we need to stay here and do our work and get this fixed so that we can go on and focus on things also that we think will help grow the economy, like tax reform, something I'm very interested in, continue our effort to right-size regulatory burdens on the economy, and keep the signs of economic growth moving forward that we've seen recently.
Well, how come your colleagues are, interested in talking about lower taxes when it comes to the tax bill, but you're okay leaving higher taxes in Obamacare?
Well, I didn't say I was, and I didn't say that people in the House were, but there are apparently some in the Senate that are.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge.
That's the challenge. So what are you going to do? I mean, is there a plan B if it doesn't come to a vote in the Senate?
Well, the plan B is we've passed our bill in the House, and we're waiting for the Senate to come up with their best idea that they think can not only pass the Senate, but come back and pass the House that will get President Trump's support. So legislating is hard, and it's time consuming, and it doesn't always fit with people's neat expectations, whether they're the leadership in both houses or the American people.
Yeah, but with all due respect, I mean, the American people are saying, look, we've been hearing about a repeal and replace for 7 years. So, yeah. It's hard, but how long can it take, sir?
Well, we passed ours, as you know, a few months ago, so now we're waiting in the Senate. And I'm as eager as everybody else to get our health care system righted.
Right. Go ahead.
Congressman, I mean, it says here that the bill would preserve a 0.9% payroll tax and a 3.8% tax on investment income on individuals that are making above $200,000 and couples that are making $250,000. Isn't that really small business owners and, basically, I mean, not middle class, but these are the people that you want to appeal to. These are the people that are providing health care to the people that need it. How do we have Grover Norquist on saying that he's going to cut these taxes, and then just, an hour ago, and you're saying that, in this specifically, we're going to keep these taxes in here?
Well, you're talking to me as if I'm in the United States Senate, and I'm not. I'm in the House. I voted to repeal these taxes. Yeah. We invite you to bring on Republican senators to react to
we have
to
been. We had, and that's what I'm saying. We had Rand Paul on yesterday, sir, and Senator Paul basically said, look, I'm a no. This is too many taxes. It's too many subsidies. You just heard what he said. Yeah. So why not go down that route? Why not say, okay, you know what? I'm going to join with Senator Paul because I don't agree with this, and I'm just going to let Obamacare implode.
Well, I think that's one of the things that could happen here. If we don't pass a repeal and replacement bill that fits the parameters that I've laid out this morning, then we're confronted with keeping Obamacare as it is. And how is that? Yeah. It's failing the American people. And that is, to me, the bigger motivator that we want to have affordability and access for our families. And we have not seen that as a result of 7 years of Obamacare.
But does that obstruct the whole agenda? I mean, this whole conversation of, you had to do health care before you did tax reform because you wanted to save money on these, on overturning all the taxes, $1 trillion over 10 years. I mean, if you don't get a bill out of the Senate to the president's desk that all of you can agree on, does that mess up tax reform happening later this year, sir?
I don't think so, in the sense that I think it may change what's contained in tax reform. It may change the direction of tax reform. It's not the one that those of us in the House would prefer. But we can use reconciliation for the FY18 budget cycle, considering if we can get a budget done in both houses. And we can use that as the vehicle to do tax reform.
Congressman, one last thing. We're not going to let you off the hook on this. This is a story that every year it gets lost when the Medicare and Social Security trustees report comes out. Here we found out yesterday, Social Security and Medicare face depletion within 17 years. For the Medicare Main Hospital Fund, it is 12 years, 2029. When are y'all going to get on the stick about fixing this?
Well, this is what a lot of us in the House have talked about. We've asked our Budget Committee Chairman Black to increase the reforms that she proposes for mandatory spending. We can't really get our fiscal house in order in America until we face the 3/4 of the budget that are in mandatory spending. And so we do need to make more reforms there. And in my view, that was one of the good things about the House bill, is it reformed the long-term Medicaid budget, shifting it back to the states, creating more innovation to save money at the state level. And those are the kinds of reforms that we've got to make if we want to have our fiscal house in order for the United States.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll see how much actual Medicaid reform comes out of this health care revamp, if it ever moves in the Senate.
Because we know what has gone on with Medicaid, Congressman, right? I mean, characterize for us the last 10 years. What happened to Medicaid?
What happens to it I'm sorry, I missed that first part
In
of
the
your question.
last 8 years, what happened to Medicaid? Characterize what happened as this program has expanded and included more than just the impoverished, the blind, and the pregnant.
Right. Well, we've expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act to way beyond the congressional intent of what the Medicaid program was for, our poor, our kids, our developmentally disabled. And we've extended to able-bodied working people with no requirements that they work or seek work or do volunteer work. And that is, again, one of the reforms in the House bill was to offer our governors the ability to have that flexibility to have work requirements.
Right.
Something that we've seen be very successful in the reform of our programs for those who are most in need.
These are the kinds of situations, though, where the messaging becomes that much more important, right, Dagan? We talk about the messaging and the Republicans trying to communicate what they're trying to do. And if you're looking at Medicaid slowing down the growth, yes, it's slowing down the growth for good reason. This program has expanded tremendously, but you need to explain that to the American people, because the Dems on the left are going to Congressman basically saying, you're cutting off people's Medicaid. Here are the numbers. You need to message that. Are you doing that sufficiently?
I think we can do a much better job. We are slowing the growth of this program and making sure the program is helping the most vulnerable, the people that the program was designed for. And we're listening to our governors about how to design flexibility to give them the ability to create Medicaid programs in their state that are unique to the state, unique to their population and their challenges.
Well, I think that's the next challenge, sorry, Maria, is that, you know, Congressman, you have to think about, too, you got to talk more about the states and about their responsibility here, because I know being in Illinois, as my home state, that's where a lot of people are worried about the states taking over a lot of that responsibility, because they're worried about the state's capabilities, frankly.
Exactly. Congressman, we're going to see you soon. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you so much, Congressman French Hill. That's the subject we talk about all the time, messaging. We'll be right back. Citigroup earnings just hitting the tape. We are looking at these numbers. The stock right now is down, but let's take a look at the numbers here, Brian. Thank you very much. Citigroup second quarter earnings beating expectations. $1.28 a share versus $1.21 was the expectation. That's on earnings per share of Citigroup. Take a look at revenue here. Also above expectations at $17.9 billion versus $17.37 billion. Stock is worsening right now. What do you think?
Following the lead at J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was up 1% early on after those numbers. Now it's dropped down. My guess is what it has to do with, Maria, is the trading volume.
Exactly what it is. Slow down in trading.
You're looking at trading volume slow. And then, frankly, the investment banking, IPO, merger and acquisition market is not strong. So other than loan volume being up at both of these banks potentially, everything else is falling short and disappointing.
Volatility obviously non-existent in the quarter, Dagan. That was a major issue for JPM as well as Citigroup.
Right, but and again, we heard from Jamie Dimon, the consumer looks good. That ultimately, and you have this incredible rollback in financial regulations, which is a big part of the tailwind for these financial institutions since the election.
By the way, I don't know why any of this is a surprise. Going into these quarterly numbers, we knew that volume was going to be down in terms of volatility, and trading volume in particular was going to be down. So they're all beating the numbers, but when you go behind the details, it was an okay quarter. Trading was down. That was a big portion.
Well, and I think
M&A is down.
That's right. And I think look at the testimony from Janet Yellen 2 days ago. She's talking about being easy and loose with money again, potentially, or at least not being so hawkish. And so that, to me, worries me a little bit with respect to the banks, because you need to see longer-term interest rates levitate a bit if you're looking at the bank model, borrowing short, lending long, because the interest rate curve, frankly, is flattening.
All these stocks are up huge since the election. 33% gain on JPM since November 9th. Would you put new money to work right here in the bank?
I would, Maria, because you've started to see the financials get life again. Yes, those numbers have been very good since November 8th. Yeah. But the reality is most of that gain came before January.
They rolled over it. Yeah, no, they rolled over this year.
But I think
even
they're ready
a
to take
slow
another leg up.
IPO outlook and M&A outlook, you would still put money into these banks?
I would, because what's happening, Heath, is the banks, if you look at the charts, if you look at some of the earnings numbers, they're starting to level off. They're starting to build that base, which I think takes them to the next leg up. You're not buying it, huh?
I'm not buying it. I can't just buy something based on just consumer loaning. I mean, we have to have some of these IPOs going on.
These have been long-term stories. The banks have been a leadership in the market for sure. We'll keep watching these. They are moving this morning, but they're moving lower. A scare in the air, meanwhile, to report. Cheryl Cusoni on that story now. Cheryl.
Yeah, Marie, we've got some other headlines we're watching for you this morning as well. This could have been one of the worst disasters ever in commercial aviation. An Airbus jet coming within 100 feet of crashing into 2 of 4 planes getting ready to take off at SFO last week. 140 people were on board. Canadian air safety regulators say instead of lining up to land on the runway, the plane mistakenly prepared to touch down on a parallel taxiway just to the right of where those other jets were idling in the darkness of San Francisco. And you just can't make this kind of stuff up. A guy in Texas forced to slide notes through the receipt slot in an ATM begging for help because guess what? He was stuck inside the ATM. Cops in Corpus Christi say the man got stuck behind the machine at a Bank of America while he was trying to change locks. He sent the note to people using the ATM. There's the note. Please help me. I'm stuck. I don't have a phone. Call my boss. Somebody eventually saved the guy, and he got some help. And really quick, let's show you this picture because I'm very excited about it. Oh yeah, a little bit of this. Beyonce introducing the twins a month after they were born. She posted a picture of herself holding the babies on Instagram. Their names are Sir Carter and Rumi. And Maria, as I send it back to you, quick note, they have trademarked those names.
That's funny. Okay. Thank you so much.
The baby names are trademarked.
Wow. All right. Coming up, a business that is ripe for success. Millennials are flocking to the restaurant that only serves avocados. We've got them here. Next. Back in a minute. Well, holy guacamole. One cafe is cashing in on a healthy food trend by opening the world's first avocado bar. Joining us right now are the co-founders of Avocado Area, Alessandro Bigi, Francesco Brachetti, and Alberto Gramini. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Alessandro, your restaurant is very popular among millennials. We talk about avocado toast all the time for some reason. Where did you get this idea?
Well, basically, I was living here in the U.S. last year, and I realized it was really hard to find some food and food offering that was healthy, but at the same time tasty. You know, like not the really boring, healthy things that you can find around usually. And so, talking with Francesco, who was living in Mexico at the time, we're like, you know what type of food has the kind of properties which is very healthy and at the same time very tasty? That's avocado. So we started making ourselves a lot of avocado toast. We tried different recipes. Then we involved Alberto, who's a chef, and designed the menu. And so basically we developed the whole concept around this.
I love this idea. Avocado areas, say it, avocaderia.
Avocaderia, yeah.
Avocaderia.
Because basically it's a Spanglish. So it's a mix of English, which is avocado, and area, which is the Spanish part, because of course it's inspired to the Mexican tradition.
That's very cool, Spanglish, avocaderia. The menu includes smoothies, toast, burgers, chocolate mousse, all made using avocado. Can you really build a business on just avocados?
Yeah, because it's a very versatile fruit, so you can combine in different recipes, including different ingredients from all over the world cuisine, and we made all these beautiful dishes. Yeah.
And you're the head chef.
Yeah.
So
basically, I study architecture in Italy, so I'm not a professional chef, but I always been passionate about food, about kitchen. So when they involved me in this project, I start to develop new recipe using avocado in every dish. Yeah.
I like the idea a lot.
Yeah.
Francesco, this restaurant has been popular, right? Tell us how it has resonated with people, because now you're thinking about adding a second location.
Yes, we actually are. The response has been overwhelming, like people flocking around from literally everywhere in the world. We had guests from Australia coming in yesterday just to visit us, and we are currently looking for a second location in Manhattan to open as soon as possible.
That is fantastic. Now, Alessandro, you also just released avocado body scrub. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so well, I mean, avocado is not only good as a food, it has a lot of good properties also for the skin.
Right.
And so we partnered up with this company in Brooklyn, and we developed our first body scrub, which we started selling last week online and in store. And so far it's been, it's been a great success because we already sold a few dozens of them. So in a few days, so I'm very happy. And I think there's a lot more that can be done also in the beauty.
Are you working on the online portion of it? I mean, can people go online and get these products?
Yes, they can, absolutely. If they go on avocaderia.com, they'll find the link and they can buy them online, both the scrub, the t-shirts, and why not come to the restaurant for a bite?
Exactly. Great. Congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alberto Gramini, Francesco Brachetti, and Alessandro BG. We'll be right back. Delicious.
You totaled your brand new car. Nobody's hurt, but there will still be pain. It comes when your insurance company says they'll only pay 3/4 of what it takes to replace it. What are you supposed to do? Drive 3/4 of a car? Now, if you had Liberty Mutual new car replacement, you'd get your whole car back. I guess they don't want you driving around on 3 wheels. Smart.
With Liberty Mutual new car replacement, we'll replace the full value of your car. Liberty stands with you. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Well, welcome back. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Friday, July 14th, Bastille Day. Your top stories right now, 8 a.m. on the East Coast. Bank earnings driving the action on Wall Street. JP Morgan and Citigroup both reporting better than expected earnings, but the companies are also highlighting the low volatility in the quarter weighed on trading revenues. We're still waiting on Wells Fargo this morning. We'll bring you those numbers when they hit the tape. At this point, these stocks were initially up, and now they are down. JP Morgan shares had been up 1%. Now it is down 1%. Wells Fargo down 1 1/3%. And as you see, Citigroup up a fraction, 1/3% higher on Citigroup. Futures indicating the markets will open fractionally lower. Dow Industrials down a fraction. S&P 500 also down a fraction. NASDAQ is up, though, this morning. We are coming off of another record high for the markets yesterday. Dow Industrials hitting the 24th record high of the year. Take a look at the European indices right now. Mixed performances to report in Europe. We got the FT 100 down 1/4%. The CAC 40 and the DAX index are up, but just fractionally. And in Asia overnight, very close to the flat line. We did have gains across the board, but as you see there, quite the fractional moves across the board in Asia. President Trump leaving Paris this morning. The top issue on the agenda upon his return, the repeal and replace of Obamacare.
We truly do believe that the Senate health care bill is the beginning of the end of Obamacare. It will return American health care to a system based on our time-honored principles of free market competition, personal responsibility, and state-based reform. And above all else, it'll give the American people more freedom when it comes to the choices that they make in health care.
We will hear from the counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, coming up this morning. Plus, new exemptions to the president's travel ban. A Hawaii judge adds grandparents and other relatives to the list. We'll bring you that news coming up. And Amazon putting your Alexa conversations up for sale. The technology giant's new move raising privacy concerns at Amazon. Tim Tebow swinging for the fences. He hit one out of the park, clinching the win with a walk-off home run. Tim Tebow doing pretty well on the baseball field. All those stories coming up this morning. And joining me to talk all about it, Fox Business Network's Dagan McDowell, Kingsview Asset Management Chief Investment Officer Scott Martin, and H2 Research Chief Research Officer Heather Herzog is with us. Great to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Markets are moving. We got bank earnings out. They were better than expected, as you predicted, but the stocks are down, Scott Martin.
Yeah, markets move in the wrong direction. Post-analysis, let's say, of these numbers, which is kind of disappointing because it's all coming down, it looks like, to the trading volume in the fixed income side, at least on JP Morgan's side there, as well as the fact that M&A, IPO activity, the investment banking stuff is not looking very strong. So anything that's being made up on loan volume is being brought back down by those things I just mentioned.
The revenue is below estimates at Wells Fargo. Revenue's coming in at $22.17 billion. That is below the estimate. Which was all the way up at $24 billion on revenue at Wells Fargo. So the revenue is light here, but the earnings are above expectations. So the revenue was actually $22.17 billion. That is below the estimate, which was $22.4 billion on the estimate. Stock is down 1%, but the earnings are better than expected at $1.07 versus $1.01 a share. again, similar story here. Low trading volume, low volatility.
Correct. Our first miss, though, Maria, on the earnings, on the revenue side, on the top line there. It's easy to beat on the bottom line. The top line miss is interesting at Wells. Maybe still fallout from that scandal just about a year ago with respect to all those accounts they were opening illegally for people.
They can't get out from under the rock because of that scandal, for sure. We're watching the bank stocks this morning, of course. Our top story this hour, however, President Trump returning from Paris with a packed agenda. He celebrated Bastille Day this morning with French President Emmanuel Macron. Now he's turning his attention to fight to repeal and replace Obamacare. President Trump tweeted this out this morning, saying Republican senators are working hard to get their failed Obamacare replacement approved. I will be at my desk, pen in hand. After all of these years of suffering through Obamacare, Republican senators must come through, as they have promised. Joining me right now to talk more about this is Counsel to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, it's good to see you. Always a pleasure.
Good morning, Maria. Thank you.
So it's amazing to me to see the House went at it twice. They finally came out with a bill. They passed it on to the Senate. What does the Senate do? Rip it up and start again instead of just voting on the House's bill. What is the President doing about all of this, division within the House and Senate?
We don't look at it as division. We look at it as cooperation and negotiation.
Okay.
And it's all being done without Democrats. Not a single one will come to the table, Maria. The Democrats have come up with two big ideas on health care reform, even though so many of them have admitted that it's flawed and it needs to be fixed, and there are many Americans who are suffering and remain uninsured and can't meet the cost of these premiums and deductibles. What are the Democrats' two ideas? Number one, bail out the insurance companies. That's not plausible, and even if it were, it's a temporary fix. Number two, do just a total federal government takeover of health care. That also does not have support among the public, let alone in the Senate. So Republicans are working on this. All the principles are still there, though, to allow people to expand the contributions to health savings accounts, and for the first time ever, to allow you to use that HSA money to meet the cost of premiums. We hear from people all the time that, they had this insurance card and it was the worst possible outcome for them because the government looks at them as, quote, insured, and they can't use the card. They simply can't access the system because the premiums are too expensive. In addition, this new bill, of course, would add a number of stability fund measures. One is an additional $70 billion on top of what's already there. We want some state flexibility to let these governors decide how the monies are spent because they know their populations best. There's $45 billion for opioids. And I think all the free market competition, making sure that the 1,300 plus counties that have one insurer, which is no choice at all, making sure that the 83 insurers who have pulled out of the Obamacare exchanges with 24 more promising to do so next year feel like this market is still more stable, they can go back in and start selling their policies. And of course, Ted Cruz's amendment made it in there as well with the intent to help cover more Americans.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, you're seeing an effort to try to come together, but then you've got also this feeling that we wanted a repeal, we're not getting a repeal. That's what Senator Rand Paul is saying. He came on the show yesterday basically saying, look, I'm a no. I'm not going to go in this spiraling down death spiral of Obamacare where this bill out of the Senate still has taxes in it, still has subsidies in it, still has major big government in it. So if this doesn't come to the floor for a vote in the Senate, Kellyanne, is there a feeling that they could just let it fail, let Obamacare implode like it is doing already, and then just move on to tax reform? Or truly, you will not be able to get to tax reform without getting something done on health care?
Look, all options are on the table, Maria, but remember, this is not just a campaign promise. It's a moral imperative. We're talking about the millions of Americans who are suffering. What about the 6.5 million who in 2015 decided to fork over money to the IRS through taxes and penalties rather than enter this wonderful system called Obamacare not? So I really think that even though people don't feel like it's full repeal or it's exactly perfectly what they would want, the fact is Vice President Pence, who's been just spectacular on Capitol Hill working with the Republican senators there, he puts it best when he says this is the beginning of the end of Obamacare. This is a 7.5-year sinking battleship that is going to turn around slowly. But we've got to start chipping away at it because there are people suffering. I mean, look at the CBO projections that 23, 24, 25 million people would be affected. It's more like 10 million. 18 million people would have coverage. Right now, it's more like 10 or 11 million. So we know people are out there suffering. We know this has been a huge impediment to small business formation and survival and prosperity. And we know there are many people in this country who do not get, like you and I do, employer-sponsored benefits, do not get government-sponsored benefits. Those millions of people, the hairdressers, the plumbers, the carpenters, the self-employed, they've been totally cut out of the system because it's too expensive and it's too top-down.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that those people have access to coverage. Is it perfect? No. I'm one who doesn't think you can put the perfect before the good, because to do nothing means that people still suffer under Obamacare, and these insurers have no faith in the exchanges. 19 of the 23 Obamacare co-ops have failed. These websites were a joke.
Yeah.
The coverage is not real. So we really want to make sure that people always understand what we're solving for here. What is the problem we're solving here? The problem we're solving for here is Obamacare.
Well, I think you make a really good point, Kellyanne, and I think that was one of your geniuses when you first came onto the campaign back last year, because you know how to message, you know how to communicate what's really important. That's what you've done in your career. And yet the Republicans have a problem with it, Kellyanne. I mean, come on. They're not discussing this as if it's people's health care. They're talking about, well, we have to save money, we have to do this. I mean, the messaging out of the GOP needs help. Is that something that you can advise them on? How come they are unable to communicate to the American people what's really important right now, and they allow the Dems to come in with their own talking points about, oh, you're cutting Medicaid, rather, when we know they're just trying to slow the growth. I mean, there's things like that they need help in terms of messaging. Isn't that right?
Well, that's right. And look, we're up against people who are willing to scare Americans and not tell the truth to them. I mean, the biggest lie of all was, if you like your plan, keep your plan. If you like your doctor, keep your doctor. And the lies have just been coming ever since on Obamacare. But you're right. I think it's so incredibly important to put people forward who truly are what we call the Obamacare victims. And so many of them, Maria, have visited us here at the White House. I've sat in the roundtables with the president, with Secretary Tom Price at HHS, with Seema Verner over at CMS, with Vice President Pence. And these people's raw and very real stories, they consider themselves to be victims of Obamacare. And you're absolutely correct to have them out there, make them household names so that people understand this is not just for the economists, this is not for the politicians to assess, but that there are people who are suffering and that there are some easy fixes that can be done through this bill. It's also, you know, this president has been much more involved than other presidents in the past on major pieces of legislation. But now he's telling the Senate, do your job, get that bill on my desk. I've got my pen in hand. I'm ready to sign it. But it also has to keep faith and hold true to the principles that he has put forward, that he talked about for many, many months. Free market care, stabilizing the markets, but also helping people who are suffering.
Yeah, because he's talked also about lowering taxes. Is he going to sign something that actually keeps 2 Obamacare taxes in there, right? The investment income tax, the payroll income tax. That's right now in the Senate bill, those taxes are there. Is the president going to sign that?
The new Senate bill does have that, and the president will assess what the senators put on his desk. It's not there yet. We can't speak hypothetically, but that is a difference in the new bill. But there are other differences too, like additional money for the stability funds, and more governor flexibility to the states. And of course, thank you for pointing out, Maria, that Medicaid spending will increase over the next decade, and that those who are lying otherwise just to scare people are really doing a disservice to those people. It's not like they're going to win any Senate seats next year because of it. I mean, you know, this quote, resistance and obstruction is hurting Americans. Now, it was a cute little bumper sticker and a slogan for a while, precious, but now it's hurting Americans, and we're going to point that out. Thanks for mentioning tax reform. I can tell you, we've been working on that here for a long time, and it's at a fever pitch as well. This is a White House that can work on many different major initiatives and reform packages at the same time, and we've got really the full force and effect of our cabinet members, of the president, the vice president, other economic minds, our legislative affairs through Mark Short and others, really pushing this forward in a way that's going to talk about the value of fairness, simplicity, be a true middle-class tax cut package and tax relief, and reform the code. Gosh, we spend billions of dollars and billions of hours. It feels like about millions of hours, billions of dollars every year just trying to comply with this code, which is draconian and Byzantine and really hurts people who can't afford to hire fancy lawyers and accountants to help them comply with basic code provisions.
And the president has been optimistic about a plan for a tax code overhaul, especially when compared to the fight to repeal and replace Obamacare. Here's what he said in an interview with Pat Robertson. I want to get your reaction and really find out from you how easy this will be in terms of getting on the same page on tax reform. Here's President Trump.
I think after health care, taxes are going to be so easy. Healthcare is very hard. Healthcare is hard because you'll do something a little bit this way, and you'll pick up that final vote, and you'll lose 4 votes over here. Now you move it back. It's this very tiny little road. It's about 2 feet wide, and it goes throughout the country. So healthcare is much tougher than taxes. No, I think taxes are going to be very well. In fact, our plan is we're talking about massive tax cuts, the biggest tax cut in the history of our country.
But, Kellyanne, don't you have similar fights going on behind the scenes? Border adjustment tax, no border adjustment tax. Deduction, what stays, what goes. Corporate tax rate, President Trump wants 15%. Paul Ryan's at 25%. Are we going to have a deja vu all over again in a month when we're talking about tax reform package?
What we're going to have is a continuing negotiation and conversation. I mean, that's what these big issues and the American people deserve, Maria. Nobody just saying, here's the only plan. And you know, yes or no, up or down. So there's a lot of discussion happening. I've sat in many of those meetings. These are robust and they're honest. And I think that what we'll end up with is a very good tax plan. But also, you and I should point out for the viewers also that this isn't just about tax reform. It's about 3% plus growth. And that's really what's going to matter to people. Energy investments, infrastructure, some welfare reform in there, in addition to tax reform, and curbing government spending.
We're all looking for that economic growth. Kellyanne, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Kellyanne Conway.
Home.
Welcome back. Palestinian gunmen opened fire in Jerusalem's Old City. Cheryl Casoni with the story this morning. Cheryl.
Yeah, Maria, we're trying to get some new details for you, but 2 police officers are confirmed dead after a shootout with 3 gunmen at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites. Those gunmen were also killed. 2 people seriously injured, and they were taken to a nearby hospital. The shootout happened at the Temple Mount. That's also a popular place for tourists. Right now, police have that entire area closed. We should add that the president was just there a few weeks ago with the First Lady. Okay, we're watching right now shares of Walmart, the stock higher in the pre-market. Goldman Sachs has upgraded the company's rating from neutral to conviction buy. That's a price target now of $84 on it. The stock's at $76.15 in the pre-market, up 1.5%. Meanwhile, shares of Target also higher in pre-market trading. The company said that comparable sales are set to increase in this quarter and that its profit should top expectations. Some retail good news for you for once. And then there's some news on Disney to bring you. They have unveiled new video and images of these Star Wars themed parks ahead of D23 Expo. So this is a large-scale model of the parks. It's going to be officially on display at D23 this Sunday. But the Star Wars parks are scheduled to debut at Disneyland and Disney World not until 2019. So we're going to have to wait for the real thing. But shares of Disney up about 5% from just 1 year ago. And finally this, Maria. Who knew that taking a selfie could be so destructive? Look at this. A woman. Oh, my God. This happened in L.A. She destroyed $200,000 worth of art at an art exhibition. She was apparently crouched down next to one of the pieces, you know, trying to take a selfie. And you saw the domino effect that just hit. Anyway, it took 6 years for the artist to create that exhibit, and it took her about 2 seconds to destroy it, taking herself.
Well, there's her picture. That's a good selfie. Oops. Wow. That is funny.
That is something that would happen to me.
Exactly. That's something I would totally do.
That almost happened in the green room just recently.
And it gets caught on camera, too. Not just the selfie, but on a closed-circuit video camera.
But like falling on somebody's coffee table and breaking it. You name it.
Good shot. Really good shot. Thank you, Cheryl. Coming up, all bets are off. Why DraftKings and FanDuel are terminating the planned merger. Just today, after we heard about this combination and have been hearing about it for the last several weeks. Meanwhile, a picture-perfect weekend, how Jimmy Buffett inspired his home state of Alabama to end its ban on margarita pitchers. Welcome back. FanDuel and DraftKings abruptly calling off their mega merger, amid mounting pressure from regulators. DraftKings CEO announcing the termination in a statement reading this in part: "We believe it is in the best interests of our customers, employees, and investors to terminate our agreement to merge with FanDuel and move forward as a separate company. In full disclosure, our parent company, 21st Century Fox, is an investor in DraftKings. We want to bring in the Brewer Group CEO and former NFL star, Jack Brewer. Jack, great to see you.
Great to see you as well.
So the FTC had denounced this merger because it would create a company that would have controlled 90%, more than 90% of the U.S. market for paid fantasy sports. Obviously, it wasn't going to happen.
No, and it would be bad for the sport. You know, fantasy sports has really changed the whole landscape in professional sports, not just football, but basketball, baseball as well. These teams have, you know, doubled and sometimes tripled their overall valuations just based on the participation of fantasy sports. You have almost 20% of the population in the U.S. that participate every year in fantasy sports. That's a big chunk, and you're talking about something that's been around for about 5 or 6 years.
You know what they did right, Jack, I think? I mean, you know, my dad and I play every weekend on a FanDuel matchup. And you know what? And this is my dad who's, you know, in his late 60s. Sorry, Dad, to give your age away. But you know what he does, Jack? He uses the app. I mean, the thing is so easy to use these days where you can just pick your team, you get your positions, you fill out your salary, and then you just pop it in there and it's on. I mean, it's like so easy that they made it so accessible for everybody in the States.
They did, and that's key. You know, that's why viewership is up so high, because you can watch a game you care nothing about because you're watching one player and you're rooting for your fantasy game that day. So it really has changed sports.
And it's not just men that are playing, right? There are women on there as well. I mean, the demographic has definitely changed. I mean, you're talking about 20% of the population, but what percentage of that are women versus men?
I think it's just 20% of that, right?
20% of the total population. The majority are men. I think over 89% are men.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's under 20% that are women of that 20%. We got to talk about Tim Tebow. Wow. Did you see him? The former NFL quarterback turning pro baseball outfielder, hitting his first walk-off homer for St. Lucie Mets last night. Watch this. Sweet. His team beat the Daytona Tortugas 5-4, Jack.
Talk about return on investment. I think they gave the kid $100,000 to sign, and now, I mean, the viewership that they're getting, he's doing a good job. And I think he has 6 home runs this year. He's batting about 240. Could use a little bit of bump in his batting average, but he actually got bumped up a level this year in the minor league, so he's doing well.
That's awesome.
He's going to draw. I mean, that's
love
the thing.
to see how great he does in another sport.
And remember, Jack, this guy was like, Tebow was a little polarizing back in the day, but as you start to get to know more about him and figure out what a great guy he is, it feels like America kind of warmed up. I mean, you know, sometimes you have these guys that people root against just for the heck of it, but Tebow is actually a guy that feels
you want to root for him.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you learn about him and you find out about him, and he's a great guy.
All right, but who are you rooting for the money fight, okay? Dagan was there yesterday at the PR event. This blockbuster event expected to surpass the existing record set by Mayweather's fight against Manny Pacquiao at 4.6 million buys. Dagan, you spoke with the UFC president, Dana White,
on his chances of defeating Floyd Mayweather. Here's what Dana White said.
Everybody is saying it's impossible. Every great boxer has fought Floyd Mayweather and never been able to beat him. This is a fight. And Conor McGregor is 28 years old. He's a southpaw, and he hits like a truck. And if he hits Floyd Mayweather in a 12-round fight, he will hurt him. So we'll see what happens.
Wow. Wow.
We'll see what happens. But Jack thinks that you think McGregor has almost no shot.
Yeah, I think if this fight almost no shot, because if this fight gets into the 6th, 7th, 8th round, you know, this man has never fought a 12-round fight.
Yeah,
after a long time, so we don't know how good of shape he's in.
Okay, Mayweather is the greatest defensive boxer of all time. Let's just put that out there. But brittle hands, and he's not known as a puncher. And Conor McGregor, if he can land one, what I use the quote, precision beats power, timing beats speed. If he can land one hard punch, and he could knock him on his backside.
No doubt. But if Floyd Mayweather has kept up his defensive skills, it's going to be an easy breezy night for him. He just moves so fast. I mean, this guy's a marketing genius. Do you see this? I think this fight will have 5 million viewers. I think he'll make over $300 million.
He's trying to get in his head. I love to see the way they're trying to get in each other's.
I don't think it'll work with Mayweather.
So you think it's Mayweather, not Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all?
Muhammad Ali is the greatest of all time.
Okay,
I agree.
And Tyson.
Okay. There you go. Jack, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Jack Brewer joining us there. Coming up, bank earnings in focus on Wall Street. Wells Fargo coming in mixed. Citigroup and JP Morgan Chase both delivering double beats, better than expected on earnings and revenue. And yet, all 3 stocks trading down, although Citigroup was up earlier. We're going to check all the stocks when we come back. Then sweet success. We'll talk to one of the names on the Forbes 30 Under 30 about how he built an artisan chocolate empire. Back in a moment. Good Friday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Friday, July 14th. Your top stories right now, 8:30 a.m. on the East Coast. Bank earnings setting the tone on Wall Street, as well as retail sales numbers just hitting the tape worse than expected. JP Morgan and Citigroup both reporting earnings that were better than expected. Low volatility, however, weighed on trading revenue for both banks, and the stocks are trading down. Declining mortgage revenue hurting Wells Fargo. It missed expectations on revenue. Take a look at these stocks down across the board. The results are driving the market action this morning. Futures were indicating a lower they were indicating a lower opening for the broader averages, but look what has happened since the retail sales number just came out and CPI just came out. Retail sales are unexpectedly down. We were expecting retail sales to be up 0.1%. Actually, for the month of June, retail sales were down 0.2%. This is worse than expected, and yet look at this market. It has reversed course and is now trading up. NASDAQ up 0.25%, 15 points higher. Dow Industrials coming off of its 24th all-time high yesterday, continuing the gains right now, up 6 points. In Europe, mixed performances for the major averages there. Take a look. Fractional moves. FT 100 down a fraction. DAX index up a fraction. In Asia overnight, gains across the board, although here too you're talking about really slight moves, fractional moves to the upside across the board. President Trump on his way home from Paris now. He is coming home to the battle over health care, however. The counsel to the president, Kellyanne Conway, joined me a moment ago weighing in on what's happening on Capitol Hill.
This new bill, of course, would add a number of stability fund measures. One is an additional $70 billion on top of what's already there. We want some state flexibility to let these governors decide how the monies are spent because they know their populations best. There's $45 billion for opioids. And I think all the free market competition, making sure that the 1,300 plus counties that have one insurer, which is no choice at all.
This coming even as the Senate bill now is facing headwinds with 2 no votes already on the table. Susan Collins and Rand Paul. Amazon putting your Alexa conversations up for sale. The technology giant's possible new move raising privacy concerns this morning. We've got the details coming up. And talk about a messy highway accident. A truck carrying eels spills all over the road, leaving a slimy mess. Ooh, eels.
That's my worst nightmare.
All right. Picture perfect. How Jimmy Buffett inspired his home state of Alabama to end its ban on margarita pitchers. Yes, margarita pitchers. We'll explain coming up. First, though, our top story this half an hour. Banks releasing their quarterly earnings this morning. JP Morgan and Citigroup both reporting better than expected earnings and revenue. Wells Fargo posted mixed results. Joining us right now on the phone is Whalen Global Advisors Chairman and investment banker Chris Whalen on the phone this morning. Chris, good to see you.
Good morning, Maria.
Thank you so much for joining us. Your reaction to the earnings out of the bank sector this morning?
It's kind of what I expected. Revenue up small. Cost cutting is still a big component for all 3 banks. And interestingly, Wells Fargo hurt on the mortgage line, which is a very important business for them.
Yeah.
The environment in residential mortgages right now is extremely tough.
Yeah, that's what Wells Fargo. That's what Wells Fargo said, and the stock is down 1.5%.
Yeah.
But there's also really weak trading volume. We know that volatility has been non-existent. So it was just an okay quarter, even though the numbers may be better than expected at JPM and at Citigroup. Would you buy the banks today?
No, I think they're fully valued. I wrote about it in a post yesterday. The expectations of the street are way ahead of the results of the banks, and there's really no catalyst to drive revenue now. And credit costs as we go forward, credit cards, things of this nature, autos, will rise, and that'll take a chunk out of earnings as we finish the rest of the year.
Chris, looking at the regulatory environment as well as the recent stress tests that the banks all passed, some with flying colors, what do you make of the environment for banks going into the second half of the year and what has been a pretty ho-hum year for financials post the election, the run-up that we had into the end of last year?
Well, look, when you change the heads of agencies, it's helpful. That's the good news. The bad news is we're probably not going to make any big legislative changes. I think the only thing that Congress will probably get to at some point is relief for small banks in terms of regulation. And the rest of it's going to get kicked the next year, I think at the earliest.
So you're not expecting tax reform. Do you think that impacts markets? Do you think we're going to see a sell-off as a result of that?
Look, Maria, the expectations coming out of the election have been way ahead of the reality. You know how hard it is to get things done in Washington at the best of times. And I think what you're seeing here is that the hope of relief from 8 years of suffering under the Democrats is still there, but it's just a matter of getting it done because they haven't been able to do health care or even broad tax reform. And to get to regulatory reform for banks is probably third or fourth on the list.
All right, let's check about the market reaction right now. Stay with us, Chris. We want to bring in Nicole Petalides on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And Nicole, you're seeing the early trading. The stocks are down. What's your take on the banks this morning?
Well, I've been speaking with the traders, and their take in particular is that, look, overall, they've done pretty well. They knew that trading revenue would be light overall. You can see that the stocks are down about 1.5% for Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. Citigroup off a little bit less than that. But the big picture here is that the comparisons to Brexit last year is a tough comp overall. And you have to understand that revenue coming in at $26.4 billion for JP Morgan is pretty great. They've benefited from the short end of the yield curve. We know that that has flattened out some. You've had 3 rate hikes from the Fed in December, March, and June, and that ultimately has helped the banks. But on the long end, what happens? And the lending was so key overall for these banks to do well, JP Morgan in particular. We did get some notes from the conference call, the CFO, Marianne Lake, over at JP Morgan, saying that fixed income performance this quarter is typical of the highs and lows, not looking to make any changes there. And also, she talked about trading revenue, saying, quote, we did pretty well in the circumstances. So overall, I think people are pretty much ultimately happy. They knew trading revenue would be light, and the comps were tough, but it was that lending that really helped them along as well.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Nicole, because we expected that we would see trading volume under pressure because of the lack of volatility. That's what we got, even though these stocks are down. Nicole Petalides, thank you. We'll be watching your reporting all day. Can we talk about retail sales here for a moment, guys? Retail sales were expected to be up 0.1%. Heath, you thought we were going to see a good quarter. Actually, you know what? For the month of June, retail sales were down 0.2%. A lot worse than expected.
I think part of the reason why, and you're right, I did think that it was going to be positive. I think what we're seeing is this higher savings rate. So Americans are starting to save a lot more. You know, back in May, it was 5.3%, excuse me. Now it's at 5.5%. So we're seeing that increase. Savings rate. So people aren't going out there and spending more. We're also seeing this consolidation of these retailers. You see every other headline, especially this summer. I can't believe it. Another store is consolidating. Another store is going out of business. Sears is eliminating a lot of their brick and mortar stores. You know, that's what
thank you, Amazon.
Yeah.
It's all the Amazon effect, and that's why you got to watch out for retail, anything outside of Amazon.
Wow.
Simple.
Should we be afraid of the real estate companies now because they may get into real estate?
Yeah. REITs.
Zillow traded down the other day. Chris, what's your take on the retail numbers?
Retail is a tough place to be, Maria. There are seismic changes going on, and if you look particularly at the ABS market where a lot of these properties have been financed, it's a very, very tough situation. It's case by case, but the whole model for retail is being torn apart.
Yeah,
and I really think it's going to be a tough place for investors to participate for a while, at least retail investors.
And also keep an eye on the automakers. Again, there's weakness there in terms of sales. You saw it particularly for the American auto manufacturers. And see, weak sales there does lead to layoffs. It's worth keeping an eye on.
So here we are talking about all this euphoria in the economy, and yet, Dagan, you and I are pointing at every day all these weak spots. You're talking about autos. Yesterday we were talking about tax receipts. It's not all that. And the Fed is raising rates.
Ultimately, it's up to the lawmakers in Washington to keep putting a little something in the punch bowl.
Yeah.
Look at
They haven't been
GDP,
doing that.
under 2% until we get maybe a report for Q2.
Yeah, we'll
Not
see
good.
what happens with tax reform if we get it, if it moves the needle. Chris, good to see you. Thank you so much for weighing in this morning. Chris Whalen on the phone. We'll take a break. When we come
Thank
back,
you.
a slimy spill. An accident. Oregon dumps thousands of pounds of live eels onto the road. The bizarre scene coming up next. And then Alabama puts its margarita pitcher ban on ice. How Jimmy Buffett inspired his home state to overturn that boozy boycott. Back in a minute. Welcome back. Now this, former President Jimmy Carter in the hospital this morning. Cheryl Casoni with the details. Cheryl.
Yeah, that's right, Maria. So Jimmy Carter taken to a hospital in Canada. It was as a precaution after he became dehydrated at his annual Habitat for Humanity building project. Now, his spokeswoman says the 92-year-old former president is receiving rehydration. He didn't appear to be in serious medical danger, luckily. Well, listen up if you own an Alexa. Engadget's reporting that Amazon may give third-party developers access to what you say to the voice assistant. privacy experts listen up. The tech blog says the move could help the company build better voice apps for Alexa, but the issue obviously is going to raise privacy concerns for users. How much do you want Alexa to know? Amazon apparently considering the move to help Alexa compete against rivals like Google and Apple. No comment yet from Amazon on this. The stock slightly higher in the pre-market. Stock is up more than 33% overall on the year. Okay, I know it's early, you're eating breakfast, and this might creep you out a little bit, guys, but I got to show it to you. Okay, this is a section of highway in Oregon covered with eels. Yeah, it was an accident. Happened after a truck that was carrying 13 containers of eels overturned on a highway. The driver hit his brakes to avoid a construction zone, and that's what ended up happening on the highway. Blech. All right, and then finally, there is this. Don't mess with Jimmy Buffett when it comes to the topic of tequila in large, yummy quantities. Jimmy Buffett's home state of Alabama backing off a ban on the sale of pitchers of margaritas. Buffett spent his childhood in Mobile. He popularized, of course, the margarita with his song. Well, some restaurants there stopped selling the drinks last month on orders from the state. But the state luckily ended this ban yesterday. The brief ban based on an old rule that makes it illegal to, get this, adulterate alcohol. The state determined that pitchers of margarita were illegal since each glass from a pitcher could have a different amount of alcohol. So if it's beer in a pitcher, oh, that's okay. But, you know, a margarita, watch out. Anyway, they backed off of it, luckily.
What about sangria? What about other stuff in pitchers?
I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, but tequila turns into like devil woman. Not you.
Vodka sodas? Anyone?
I was just going to say, I want to see that sometime.
Yeah,
we got to go have a tequila one night.
handy? Let's
yeah,
put
no,
that
I
to
got to
the
see
test.
that. All right, in case you missed it, we had a great week here on Mornings with Maria. Take a look at some of the top moments from the program. You've said that you will not support the health care bill in its current form. Why not?
You know, I pledged to the voters to repeal Obamacare. I think it's a disaster. But the bill doesn't repeal it. It keeps about half of the Obamacare taxes. It keeps most of the Obamacare regulations. It keeps most of the Obamacare subsidies. And it creates a giant new insurance bailout super fund of about $200 billion. This isn't repeal by any means, shape, or form.
I respect Senator Paul. At the same time, I think I could make this bill better yet, but it may not be everything I want either.
Right.
But I'm not going to let the perfect get in the way of the good.
The president, quite frankly, has done everything that he needs to do on it, but it's now up to the Senate. The House passed a bill.
Yeah.
We passed one in the House. So, you know, come on, United States Senate.
More than 2 million followers on social media, and he's also been named sexiest doctor by People magazine, Dr. Mike.
My job is to not only educate people, but prevent problems from happening in the first place. And that's what I really look forward to lawmakers taking that into consideration.
Narrow their focus, make it a corporate tax rate reduction, and drop it by a lot. They can get it done right away.
The Fed seeks to raise the federal funds rate, its target interest rate. It seeks to raise this at a time when, as Janet Yellen herself says, the economy could be weaker than she expects, or it could be stronger than she expects.
What is the overall energy outlook from your standpoint, and will it include nuclear?
The United States now has the potential, and I think will very quickly, not only become energy independent, but we will become energy dominant. We're going to make nuclear cool again.
I once said to him, 10% less Trump would be 100% more effective. And he raised an eyebrow. He looked at me and he said, exactly what are you talking about? And they said, are you talking about my tweets? I think the most accurate parallel is Arthur Miller's great play, The Crucible, about the Salem witchcraft trials. What we know is the elite media wakes up in the morning and knows Donald Trump did something horrible overnight. I wonder what it was.
Celebrities, musicians, if that is the new politics, I think it's great. Donald Trump is the president. It's over, everybody.
The 90s are trending right now. And over the years, we had several fans actually reaching out to us on social media and elsewhere saying, bring Zima back.
My life is powered by Amazon.
Is that right?
It's unbelievable. You get everything delivered, and the programming is really good right now.
You know, I think we're going through a major shift right now.
now and how we think about the economy. It's the Amazon economy.
Brandless is able to sell products at such a low price because the company eliminates what you call a brand tax. Explain.
So the brand tax is the inefficiency that you and I and everyone here have been paying for the things that we buy every day. Better doesn't need to cost more, and everybody deserves it.
Steve and I were really dying to talk about the Kardashians, but we decided to defer.
I interviewed Kim Kardashian.
Oh.
She knows her stuff.
Okay, that's good to hear.
This is a smart marketer.
Investing in Detroit. It has been a long road to recovery since the struggling city filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in our country's history. But now the Motor City is known for its revitalization efforts. One of the small businesses thriving is Bon Bon Bon, the city's first artisan chocolate shop in 40 years. Let's bring in Bon 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 founder Alex Clark. Alex, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Congratulations. First of all, what is Bon Bon Bon? Where did you get the name?
Oh my gosh. Well, Bon 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 makes bonbons. The idea is that there's really no internationally accepted definition of what a bonbon is, which is ideal for somebody who's dealing with chocolate as an art form because it means we pretty much get to do whatever we want with it. So they're all the same shape and size, and then we fill them with whatever flavors are inspiring us at that time. Ultimately, Bon 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 means good goodies, and that's what we try to make.
I'm a buyer of that, Dagan. How about you? Bon Bon Bon.
Yes, absolutely. What is it like being in Detroit? Like, what has been the upside for you, given just the financial condition of the city?
You know, the best thing about being in Detroit right now as an entrepreneur is that we have such an amazing community here. It's an amount of support that I don't think I've ever seen in any other city. And not just because my family's been here for so long, but even newcomers are feeling a lot of love for investing here, investing their time, their resources, coming here and visiting. The friendly nature of it and the way that people get behind ideas and get behind togetherness here is absolutely unmatched.
Isn't that great? But you're selling pieces of chocolate, what, for like $3 a piece? I mean, to see this struggling city, and people rally to it and come and pay $3 for a piece of chocolate, what kind of response are you seeing?
It's absolutely overwhelming. We have operated on retail only because up until about 2 months ago, we were making everything still out of a 650 square foot kitchen. So the entire growth of our business and the entire success of our business has been based off of this Detroit market that just can't get enough. The exciting thing about it is that having been entirely based in the city, it's cool to know how successful something that is seen as being so luxurious can be in a place where people aren't really accustomed to thinking of it as being luxurious. It is. We're a blue-collar chocolate shop, but that doesn't need to mean that it's not amazing chocolate.
And Alex, you're expanding very quickly, right? You have a bunch of different partnerships with Shake Shack. You have a retail space, but then you're expanding to different markets. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we have our retail space, which is downtown Detroit, as well as our manufactory, which is in Hamtramck. We just went from that 650 square foot space to a 6,000 square foot building that opens up next Wednesday. So we're thrilled about that. We do pop-ups all over the country and all over the world. And then we're opening our online store in October. That's like a fully integrated system that makes you feel like you're in our retail store. So it welcomes you here to Detroit, where you can try Bon 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 the way that we want you to try it.
Really cool stuff. Thank you so much, Alex. We'll be watching the developments. Congrats to you.
Thank you so much.
We love learning about small business and the growth stories there. Alex Clark, we'll be right back. Final thoughts from this all-star panel.